Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Heartland Institute has been around, I think, about 30 years. It actually started as an organization that was supposed to review public policy in Illinois. It started long before I got there. The first president is still there. He is the current president, and he says they've decided to become a national organization in scope because nobody in Illinois would pay any attention to anything they said. That is literally true. They did reports, and they took them to Mike Madigan and our other friends in Springfield, and Mike Madigan threw them in the garbage. And so they decided if we're going to stay in business, we need to expand. And so now Heartland looks at issues nationally. Some people say Heartland is a libertarian organization. Some people say it is a conservative organization. I don't like those terms. I think it is a free market-oriented organization. We try to look at issues, budget and tax issues, financial and real estate issues, environmental issues, healthcare issues. We've been doing a lot lately because of the Obamacare fiasco. The school reform, that's another big issue that Heartland looks at. So we look at these issues and try to come up with ways to come up with free market solutions. We do a lot of work with nationally known organizations, the Cato Institute, Reason Foundation, a lot of state-based groups. If you look at our publications, you go on our website, you will see where we have byline articles from people at Cato Institute, at Reason Foundation, at Truth in Accounting. In fact, Bill Bergman, who works with Sheila, has an article on our website right now, as a matter of fact. So we have state and local organizations that we work with.
And where does that publication go?
My publication is Budget and Tax News, and that's where the Bill Bergman article is.
And who's your audience?
Our audience, good question, I'm glad you brought that up. Our audience, believe it or not, is mainly legislators. Our publications go directly to members of Congress, the U.S. Senate, goes to state legislators in all 50 states. It also goes to hundreds of, all of these publications also go to several hundred reporters and editors around the country who focus on these issues. And of course, we also send them to Heartland donors, people at the other think tanks and tax watchdog groups, those kinds of groups. And of course, they're on the web, so whoever is looking for information on the web can get our publications. I got interested in budget and tax issues as a boy, believe it or not, because for more than 30 years my father was involved in local politics. He for many years was a township trustee. He for 12 years was mayor of my hometown. He was an alderman before that. So I grew up watching and listening to politicians literally in my house. I became a newspaper reporter and worked for the News Sun in Waukegan for a while. I was a Tribune reporter. I covered McHenry County Board for a few years. I worked in corporate communications for a big insurance company for a while. So I started covering state and local government. And of course, in college, I had a lot of interest in this, so I took a lot of economics courses and sociology and things. Not much poli-sci, oddly enough. I had enough politics growing up with it, but I gravitated to doing this work, and I've been now one of the Heartland editors and research fellows since 2004. So I've looked at a lot of budgets and grew up listening to what politicians think and how they act and what they say, and how what they say is so often different from what they actually do once they get power. If I had to write about politics, I'd be doing something different. I enjoy writing about policy issues and reading about policy. I don't like politics. If I had to cover that, I wouldn't be doing it. I want to quickly give you 2 recommendations. Everybody here is interested in ideas on how to maybe control spending and deal with some of the issues that Sheila brought up. Civic Lab, CIVICLAB. They're in Chicago. Civic Lab is a new organization, pretty new. They have a bunch of people who are community activists. They have some people with economic backgrounds. They have people with local government backgrounds. They have a nice website. They're still trying to get up and running. As I say, they're new. But it looks to me like they have a good focus. And I think if you go on Civic Lab, you will maybe find some ideas that might help you in what you want to do. And you, of course, can send them emails or a phone call people at Civic Lab, and they might be able to work with you to help give you some ideas. There's another organization that's based in Reading, Connecticut. They have a website called smarttowns.org. Smarttowns.org. They've been around since, I think, 2009. And they're an organization very much like Elgin Octave. It was a group of people in Connecticut who saw spending and debt in their town starting to go out of control. And I'm going to give you this. This is printed off their website. And if anybody wants to copy it, feel free. This is How to Reduce Property Taxes with a Citizens Audit Committee. Things are actually a lot different in Connecticut than they are here. Here you have separate city council and a separate school district, separate fire districts and park districts and things. In Connecticut, you don't have that. You actually have a city council that controls the schools. They can veto a school board budget if they want. So there's a lot more control at the town council level in Connecticut than anybody in Illinois is used to. So when you read this, and if you go on the smarttowns.org website, you'll see a lot of stuff that pertains to schools, but a lot of what they have on there can be applied to what you have here. One of the neat things about smarttowns.org is that they have solicited ideas from people literally all around the country. What has your town done to control spending in this area? Or what has your town done to control spending in that area? And they have stories and links to what towns in Iowa, Oregon, Georgia, wherever. So you can get ideas literally from people all around the country by going to smarttowns.org. It's a good site. Now, turning to what can be done to control government spending. I wish I could tell you there was a lot that could be done, but it's very hard to do because you have a lot of people who like government spending. I tell my wife that government is one of the best bargains we have for precisely the reason Sheila was talking about a while ago. We get a whole lot more government than we pay for. We have all sorts of promises made. We have all sorts of spending that is done without $1 of taxes for every $1 of services that you get. And I agree wholeheartedly with Sheila. If we had to pay for all the government we get, there would be a lot of people demanding a lot less government because your taxes would skyrocket. They would skyrocket locally. They would skyrocket at the state level. They would skyrocket at the national level. When we look at what Sheila had up there, I'm very low tech, by the way. This is my presentation right here. When we look at pensions and retirement benefits and all these things, ultimately we're looking at costs that are there because of people employed by government, right? I went on the Elgin City website, and just out of curiosity, I started looking at all the services and things up there. You have 18 boards and commissions. And many of those boards and commissions have multiple committees. You've got Board of Health, Board of Cultural Arts, Convention, Housing Authority, and Image Advisory Commission. That sounds fun. You've got Property Maintenance Board of Appeals, a Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission, all kinds of things. And that, I think, is a symptom of how government over the years, over many years, has grown way beyond what anybody 100 years ago would have thought of as a core function of government. A lot of people, they like services. They like government because they often get more from government than they pay in. So you have people in Elgin and in McHenry, where I live, and everywhere else, we have a lot of people who go to elected officials and say, we need to do X, or I wish we were doing Y. And people in government tend to be responsive to those people, much more responsive than they tend to be to people who say, we need to stop doing this, we need to stop doing that. My father, I'll use him as an example. He's no longer in politics, he's up in his 80s. He's a Catholic and he believes the Pope is not Catholic enough. He described himself as a Republican conservative, and he believed Ronald Reagan was not conservative enough, right? He believes government everywhere is too big, it's too powerful, it's too intrusive, but it wasn't that way when he was running. Government was good when he was running. And you wind up with people all the time who go into government saying, I believe we need to control this, and I believe we need to cut that, and 5 years later they're spending money on this stuff, or they're spending more money on something else. George Bush, compassionate conservative, we heard about the huge unfunded liabilities that he has imposed on all of us by giving us a Medicare prescription drug bill that literally has not one penny of money designated for it. He might not have gotten that bill if we'd have been told, this is going to cost us $700 million a year, and here's the $700 billion a year, and here's the $700 billion that we're going to be taxing to pay for it. There are some things that I think can be done. And it has to start with looking for ways to shrink your workforce. You have to look at these 18 boards and commissions. You need to look at the 19 city services that I saw on the website total. You have to look at things like that and ask yourselves, are these really core functions of government? Should government really be doing this? And you have to start agitating for some of those things that are not core functions to be eliminated or somehow privatized so that you shrink your workforce. Health benefits, pension benefits, all these things that Sheila pointed to as huge problems are there because you have big workforces ultimately. I'm going to ask, Toby, is it you're the councilman? Does your city council approve resource officers for schools? Do you put cops in schools?
Yes.
Get rid of them. Get rid of them. An avocation of mine is criminology, believe it or not. I took some sociology courses in college and I got interested in it. Now, that to me is just about the most useless expense there is. One of the things that people in government love to do, and that happens in the news media, is that they put fear into us. People who are fearful want government to protect them. We're at 50-year lows for crime. Crime rates have not been this low since the 1960s. Crime rates were even lower in the 50s, and in the 1950s we had no background checks, no waiting periods, no age limits to buy guns. There was no Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. There was none of that stuff, and we were actually safer then than we are now. And right now, We are as safe as we've been in 50 years. People are all afraid of school shootings, right? Right? Well, mass shootings peaked, believe it or not, in 1929. There's a criminologist named Grant Dewey who literally has written the book on mass murder in the United States. It's called Mass Murder in the United States, A History. And he's gone back over decade after decade after decade of records. The number of mass shootings, believe it or not, is on the decline. It's not on the increase. The number of mass shootings in this country happened, the greatest number happened in 1929. That was the peak in this country. Almost nobody believes it, but the information is there. When we look at schools, you can go to the University of Virginia website. They have something called the Curry School Violence Project. And the Curry School Violence Project does exactly what you would think it does. It looks at school violence. And I'll pass this around if you want to see it. This is off their website and you can get the details. Homicides by students on school grounds has declined substantially since the 1990s. Okay. Juvenile violence is not increasing. The dramatic decline in juvenile homicides, man, listen to those words, the dramatic decline in juvenile homicides and other juvenile violent crime in the 1990s demonstrates the observed decline in school violence as part of a larger national trend. They have juvenile arrests for homicides, students threatened or injured with a weapon at school, violence against teachers, percentage of students who carried a weapon to school by gender. All of these things have markedly declined since the 1990s.
Well, would that be when they put the police in?
No, it has nothing to do with that. Crime all around the country has declined. It has declined in every demographic group. It has declined all around the country. It's down in New York, it's down in Atlanta, it's down in Chicago. You know, we hear about how violent Chicago is, right? They're going to have 400 some murders this year in Chicago at the pace they've gone, right? In 1974, there were 970 murders in Chicago. In 1992, there were 943 murders in Chicago. You are far safer in Chicago now than you were 20 years ago, far safer than you were 40 years ago. The decline in crime has nothing to do with school resource officers. We are a far safer country, and there are a whole bunch of reasons that criminologists can come up with, but none of them have to do with school resource officers. There you cut your workforce right there. People need to understand what the reality is. And the reality is that we have two kinds of crime going on. And I'm focusing on crime because police and firefighters are such a huge portion of the budget, right? They're probably your biggest portion, right? Yeah. If you want to have the biggest impact, you have to go where the biggest spending is, and it's in public safety. Crime has been an issue that has interested me for a long time. It's interested me because there so often is a total disconnect between the reality of what's happening and the images that we see on TV and see in the newspapers. Police are becoming militarized. My sheriff's department has an armored vehicle. I bet Elgin has one.
Yes.
Sure. And pretty soon they're going to have drones. When you see, just a couple of days ago, well, I guess it was last week now, 12-year-old kid went into a school and he shot and wounded 2 students and he killed a teacher. And I was reading articles on this. The kid shot himself right after this. He was dead before the cops got there. And I was reading an article where it said 200 police from departments as far as 60 miles away responded. Now they responded knowing that the one shooter is already dead. Now why are we sending literally 200 police to respond to a shooting that is long over? And if you look at the images of these pictures, the photos and the video, these cops come in and you cannot tell, are they soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan or are they cops? So we have police presence in the schools that I don't think is necessary. We have police responses that are so over the top, it's ridiculous. And that all adds to the cost of running the city of Elgin. You probably have a lot more cops than you need. I'm going to say something that will probably offend a lot of people here because I know a lot of conservatives. I think the most destructive, if you really want to have an impact on costs, you have to get public safety under control. We have the militarization of the police. We have, many estimates say more than 50,000 SWAT raids a year in this country. That's, there's your police forces. And they're overwhelmingly related to the drug war. The drug war has been fought for more than 40 years now. And you can go on the National Institutes of Health sites and you can see their charts on levels of substance abuse. And if you track from 1970 to now, you see it goes like this. Year after year after year after year. And it's virtually unchanged over those 40 years. So why are we fighting a drug war? It's had no impact on the level of substance abuse in this country. It has created violent street gangs that didn't used to exist until we had a drug war. It's resulted in international drug cartels. It's narco-terrorism. This is probably the most destructive policy the United States government has. In 1970, Illinois had 8,000 people in prison. Total prison population. You know what it is now? It's almost 50,000. So it's increased by more than 6 times. And the general population has grown by about 15% in the state of Illinois. And thousands and thousands and thousands of those people are there for doing things that would have been perfectly legal 30 or 40 years ago. There was a time in this country when it was legal. I've got the ads on my computer. I meant to print one out and show you. I have an ad from a turn of the century magazine advertising cocaine toothache drops. And even in the 1920s, it was legal to have some of that stuff, but you couldn't have a beer. You couldn't have wine. And this gets back to what I mentioned before about how the number of mass shootings in this country peaked in 1929. Why do you think that was? It was because of Prohibition. It was because of the Al Capone gangs and all of that violence. There was more violence then in the 1920s than there is now. Most of those mass shootings were gangsters killing each other. Most of the killings in Chicago were gangsters killing each other. End the drug war, and you'll end most of that violence. And you will certainly reduce the need for police, which will certainly reduce the problems that Sheila was pointing out with pensions and health benefits. I'll probably get cops reading this and harassing me at home, but this is where the big costs are. We have way too many police who are way too aggressive for the level of crime that we have in this country. And the crime hasn't gone down because of the police. Because, as I say, we were even safer in the 1950s when there were virtually no gun control laws, and when we did not have police departments with armored vehicles, and when we did not have all of the SWAT teams and everything else. So there are a lot of factors that go into crime. When I look at going from 8,000 prisoners to almost 50,000 in my state, and when I look at the huge increase in the number of people in public safety, it just makes no sense. So you have to start you have to start dealing with those cops and firefighters who will probably riot the way Sheila was talking about they did in Wisconsin. And you have all sorts of other things. You know, you can, well, this will probably amaze people. Did you know there are private police agencies? There are towns that have them. Town in New Jersey wiped out its entire police force. There's a town in California that fired its entire police force and farms it out now to the sheriff's department.
Did they have better results?
Yeah. Yeah, with better results. There's, let me see if I can find some of my organizations here. Oh, getting back to the violence in schools. I'm going to pass this around here. Yeah, let me pass this around. You can take a look at some of this. There's actually an organization, I have their press release down there, that is working to try to get cops out of the schools. And some of the members of that organization are themselves cops. We're arresting kids in schools who, when I was a kid, would have gotten detention for something. It's aggressiveness that is unnecessary.
Like pointing your finger at somebody and saying it's a gun gets you kicked out of school today.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There are two professors, there's a professor I want to mention. There's a Professor Hakim, H-A-K-I-M, and there's a Professor Blackstone, just as it sounds. They work at Temple University. And they have done a lot of research over the years into privatizing services, including public safety services. In North Carolina, there are cities with private police. They don't have public police departments anymore. They're private police. There's DeltaCompanyPolice.com. There's CapitalSpecialPolice.com. Those are two companies in North Carolina that provide private police services. There's the Cincinnati Private Police Association. There are towns in Ohio that are moving to private police forces. Police don't like to hear this, I guarantee you that. Of course, there's Wackenhut. Probably a lot of you recognize Wackenhut Corporation. They're a huge private security firm, and they actually have private police. Right here in Illinois, we have American Emergency Services. American Emergency Services is run by a man named Gary Jensen, J-E-N-S-E-N. And I'll bet a lot of you did not know that the United Airlines headquarters out near Des Plaines has, for a couple of decades, more, almost 30 years now, been protected by a fire department that is private. He runs American Emergency Services, and he provides private paramedic and fire services to that area, which includes the entire United Airlines headquarters. That's not a government-run fire department. That is a privately run private department right out there in Des Plaines. So it can be done. It is being done. It's a tough nut to crack because the police deal in scaremongering, and they will tell you all kinds of terrible things will happen. Your firefighters will probably tell you all kinds of terrible things would happen. The Village of Lakewood, I live in McHenry County. The Village of Lakewood for several years had private fire because they were hiring the Crystal Lake and Lakewood butt up against each other. They hired the city of Crystal Lake to provide their fire and paramedic services, and they got into a dispute over how much money was owed. So Lakewood said, we've had enough of you, and they actually hired Gary Jensen's firm, the firm that protects United Airlines headquarters. And for several years, they were providing private fire services right there in McHenry County. So I think that's a big thing you need to do. Other things. I have been, for many years, concerned about tax increment financing. I know you have tax increment financing, and I just saw Sheila roll her eyes, and she did so for good reason. Tax increment financing is one of the biggest scams in local government in America. Tax increment financing is often a deal that rewards politically connected real estate developers, contractors. A few years ago, Congressman Mike Quigley, when he was county board member, Mike Quigley in Chicago, he did a study of tax increment financing in the city of Chicago and estimated that the tax bill, the property tax bill in Chicago was somewhere around 13% higher than it would be if they didn't have all these TIFs. Tax increment financing was something that was created in the 1980s as a way to redevelop blighted areas. The problem with tax increment financing is that there are no real standards for what constitutes blight, and often we find tax increment finance districts in areas that no reasonable person would consider to be blighted. The Chicago Loop, does that look like a blighted area to you? The Chicago Loop has tax increment financing. The village of Lake Forest, I don't know that they've paid off this TIF yet, but they had a TIF district that included, now, has anybody been in Lake Forest? Can anybody tell me where the blight is? They had a tax increment finance district that included a Ferrari dealership, okay? And this is a tool that is supposed to be used to redevelop, as I say, blighted areas, but it often is not used that way. When TIF districts...
They have a tendency, I found in the budgets, to just, they don't include any of that.
Yeah, most people, you won't see TIF anywhere in the budgets. They become slush funds. We see TIF districts designated, they'll create a district here, and it's not performing well, so they'll take money from here and put it over here. It's a huge mess.
When I released our numbers,
No, go ahead.
The village of Cook did call me because they were the first district, and they said, well, what numbers are you using? I said, out of your financial statements. And he's like, oh, well, those include the TIF numbers, and the taxpayers don't owe any of those.
Yeah, right.
It's like, they're like, well, it's going to be, the people in that district are going to pay them, the taxpayers don't owe them. And I said, well, they're on your audited financial statements as a liability. I said, if you want to talk to your auditors and have them take that liability off, I'll take it off my analysis.
The way tax increment financing works is they designate an area for TIF redevelopment. And the tax revenue, if it's at this level, the property tax revenue stays at that level. But as development occurs, tax receipts go up. But the amount that goes to the school, that goes to the city, that goes to the libraries, that goes to the fire district, and your mosquito abatement district, or whatever you have, stays at that level. And then the incremental increase in tax revenue is then supposed to go back to fund whatever your redevelopment project is. But developers wind up with this money. There have been whole shopping centers built on cornfields. Now, I happen to like cornfields. I have relatives who are farmers. I don't think anybody would look at a cornfield and say, yeah, that's a blighted area. But we've had entire shopping centers built virtually for free because they took farmland that was paying almost nothing in taxes, created the TIF district, put a shopping center there. Now you have a whole boatload of money coming in because of the development, and it goes right back to the developers to pay them literally for a free shopping center. This has happened around here.
I don't want to interrupt you, Mr. but the library does close in 10 minutes.
Oh, okay.
So if you could wrap up
So,
this
yeah.
area and take down.
So watch.
Yeah.
So watch out for tax increment financing. Start asking how much money is coming in. Where is that money going? Who's getting that money? What are they doing with that money? When is that TIF going to end? They were originally created to last 23 years, but we have all over the state TIF districts that have been extended 35 years. You have K through 12 education. That's 3 generations of school children who never get tax money that is supposed to go to the school districts, in a way. Because what the school districts do and what the city does and what everybody else does is they make up for that money that is not coming in by trying to raise their tax rates. So a TIF district is ultimately a tax increase on you, because the revenue that development creates that is supposed to go there to the schools and libraries and everybody else doesn't go there. So you make up the difference. Be careful of TIF. You have to ask, get back to the core functions. I happen to like the Elgin Symphony Orchestra. I was telling Julie, when I was a kid, I was in high school with a couple of kids. One was in my graduating class, and his younger brother was a year behind me. His father was one of the first violinists for the Elgin Symphony Orchestra. And in those days, they played free. They don't play for free anymore, do they? Now, how is it that they were able to play for free back then, and they don't do it now? I mean, why? Is this, you have to ask, is this a function of government? And if it is, if you do believe it is a function of government, then you have to ask, are we paying what we should pay? Are we paying too much? You've got your Riverside Promenade. How's that doing financially? Government does not belong in the development business. Government belongs in the business of trying to make the government, whatever unit it is, responsive to whatever citizens they represent, and do it in ways that treat everybody fairly, honestly, and attracts businesses. You have a development director and all these people trying to attract business and development, and you dole out various incentives, right? Every time you dole out an incentive to bring a business into town, you have brought in a competitor for somebody who's probably already been here years and years and has paid taxes for years and years, and now you're going to pay someone to come here to be in direct competition with somebody who's been here for years and years. Government, I know from my father, people in government like to think they're instruments or maybe the engines of growth. No, you're not. Government should not be that. Government should just be there to be doing just certain basic things and letting people do what they want to do to the extent they can. And when government picks winners and losers, when government decides we're going to try to spark development over here, that means you're probably going to hurt development over there. Is anybody familiar with Frederick Bastiat? Frederick Bastiat is famous, that which is seen and that which is not seen. He was a French philosopher and economist back in the 1800s who wrote about this problem of the seen versus the unseen. When we build a stadium, you were talking about Bridgeview with their soccer stadium earlier, when we build promenades, when we build whatever, we can see activity and we can see jobs that have been created. And so we think, oh boy, look at the good thing we've done. But as Sheila has pointed out, you have to pay for it. You either have to pay for it now or you have to pay for it in the future. And so when we do this thing that generates activity over here, we take money from over there, which means people, if we tax it right away, that means everybody who pays that tax now has less money. And if we've built a promenade where we want people to do whatever, a river walk in my town is a big fiasco. if we take money to pay for that thing, that means these people now have less money to spend going out to dinner. They have less money to spend getting a new pair of shoes, getting the car repaired, getting a new roof on the house, whatever they need to do. It's real easy to look at those concentrated benefits, and it's real easy to forget about the diffuse costs. But we need to focus on that. This is one of my pet peeves is economic development agencies. I cannot tell you how many times I have run stories about failed economic development projects. And they've got their economic development staffs, and they've got their projections of how much money is going to come in, and it doesn't work. My town built a river walk. We knocked down the old McHenry Hospital building, paid $1 million for it, leveled everything, prepared the site for a developer to come in, let the developer buy this $1 million property for $10, literally $10. He put up a 4-story building. 3 stories were to have luxury condos, and the bottom floor was to have 12 retail businesses. Well, it's now been, I think, 8 years. Not a single luxury condo was ever sold. They converted it to just ordinary apartments now. Not even all of those are rented. And the 12 retail businesses we were promised, number 5 just moved in recently. So there's still, all these years later, 7 empty spaces. We've given them $2.3 million of incentives. And for what?
They wanted to do that right across the street from here.
This is the kind of thing I see in Elgin, it's in McHenry, it's all over the place. This is just scratching the surface, but it really, if you want to get a control on this stuff, you have to get a control of economic development that picks winners and losers, and more often than not, they're picking losers. You have to look for ways to try to shrink your payroll. Not easy to do, but you have to shrink your payroll. You have to find out what's going on with TIF and stop any expansions of TIF, stop any extensions of existing TIFs, because ultimately it's simply taking money that should go to schools and other places and sending it to developers, which means that you make up the difference.
Right.